If you produce your own music and you keep hearing that your mix sounds muddy, but you have no idea what that actually means or how to fix it, this video is for you. I'm going to show you what a muddy mix sounds like, why it happens, and exactly how to fix it step by step. So what is a muddy mix? A muddy mix happens when too many sounds pile up in the same frequency zone at the same time. The result is a mix that feels thick, muffled and unclear. Individual elements lose definition and everything blurs into one wall of sound. Mud is not about missing high frequencies, it's about too much build-up in the low mids, and every sound occupies a frequency range. You can think of it like lanes on a highway. The muddy zone sits between 200 Hz and 500 Hz. That's where most instruments have their body and weight, and when too many elements crowd into that zone and cause traffic, the mix becomes congested and loses punch. And in electronic music, this happens fast. Your kick and bass are already competing in that range. So if you add pads, chords or a lead with low mid energy, suddenly nothing cuts through. Just a dense and defined wall of sound that no cue on the master bus will fully fix. How to tell if your mix is muddy? So the first thing I do before touching any plugin is switch my track to mono. So you can do this with the utility plugin in Ableton. So just drop it on your master and hit the mono button. So why mono first? Because stereo effects like reverb and chorus spread your sounds across the left and the right channels. And that spread hides problems. And the moment you collapse everything to mono, those problems have nowhere to hide. If your mix sounds muddy in mono, it is muddy. Simple as that. So pro tip for you, you can assign a keyboard shortcut to that mono button so you can switch back and forth instantly while you listen. Once I'm in mono, I load my mixing rack onto the master. This is free to download in the description if you want it. And inside the rack I have a preset called bass range, which focuses on 80 to 300 Hz. But for muddiness, we want to zoom in on 200 to 600 Hz and save it as a new preset called muddy range. So now I play the track and use that band like a magnifying glass, and I am only listening to that frequency zone. Then while it plays, I will switch between mono and stereo and ask myself two simple questions. Is there any build-up happening in that area? And can I hear elements clashing or fighting for the same space? Now let's see how to fix it. I like to use a top-down approach, starting with the most important element in that range, the low end. First, let's check our kick's tail length. If the tail overlaps into the next kick, it can create rumble in the low mids, so trim or shape it if needed. In my case, mine is fine, so let's move on to the bass. We want to avoid the bass clashing with the kick every time it hits, and to do that, we'll add sidechain compression to the bass, and that will give the kick more room and stop them from fighting in that low mid zone. Nothing else to fix here, so our low end is done. Next, we can clean up the drums, and for that we are going to apply a high pass filter to every drum element that doesn't need low mid energy, one by one. The idea is to only remove what's unnecessary, the lows you can't actually hear, without stripping the body out of the sound. Let's do the same thing for the rest of the drums. Next, let's attack the instruments. So we solo the instrument group and use our two techniques, mono switch and muddy bend, to spot what's clashing in that zone. In my case, the piano and chord pad are playing at the same time, roughly the same chords at the same octave. So instead of fighting to blend the two, I'm simply going to remove the least important one for this part of the track. And we can always bring the piano back later, during a break for example. Once that's done, we do a frequency cleanup, but this time using a high pass filter and when needed, a low shelf. And the reason is simple. A low shelf turns the low mids down gently without cutting them completely, while a high pass can sometimes do too much and leave you with the opposite problem, a thin sounding track. So go through every element one by one and clean up that zone. Let's be careful to not overdo it. If the element is losing its body or warmth or starting to sound thin and distant, you've gone too far. So the goal is just enough to stop the clash, not to strip the low end out completely. Let's do the same thing for the rest of the instruments. Once that's done, turn the muddy bend back on and listen again. In my case, the harp is still sitting a bit too loud in that area, so I'm just going to bring the volume down slightly. And to finish off, let's check if there are any effects on each track. Some reverb, delay or echo. These effects can add energy to your low mids without you noticing. To fix that, you can apply a low pass filter directly on the effect to remove it from that zone, but for more control, we can move effects onto a return channel instead. In my case, the chord pad has a reverb loaded in, and the idea is to move that reverb onto a return channel at 100% wet, then add an EQ after it with a low pass to remove everything we don't need in the lows and avoid phase issues. If needed, you can add a low shelf too to control the muddy range further. Then feed just the right amounts back into the instrument. And finally, for a bit more detail, we can apply a sidechain on the instrument group. We can even make it frequency specific, sidechaining between 0 and 600 Hz. And this lets the kick and bass breathe even more through the whole mix without squashing the instruments completely. So now let's listen to the whole before and after at a similar volume and hear the difference. Much better. We can hear the highs and the punch coming back to life, and the track feels louder even at the same volume. And that's the power of controlling your low mids. If you want the full checklist covering everything from this video, plus a few extra points we didn't get to, grab it for free in the description. And while you're there, you'll also find the mixing and mastering checklist and the mixing rack if you want those too. Hope this helps.